Hi, welcome to the last Polar Bear live chat of the Polar Bear season. We're so happy you could join us today. I think it's going to be a really nice chat. My name's Elisa McCall, and I'm with Polar Bears International, and I am coming to you from my house in Whitehorse, Yukon. So I unfortunately do not get to be in Churchill right now, but we do have some staff members who do get to be there. So I want to introduce you to everyone, and then let's get started looking at some season highlights today, which is what we're looking at. So Dave and Kyron, could you say hi from Churchill?
Yeah, hello. As Lisa said, we're in Churchill. My name is Kyron McIver, and I'm the Churchill Operations Manager here. You might be able to tell that we're actually standing in the PBI house right now.
Yeah, I'm Dave Alcorn, field assistant here in Churchill, Manitoba, and yeah, it's great to be with you guys today.
Thanks, you guys. That looks nice and warm where you are, maybe a bit warmer than Buggy One is usually. And of course, we're joined by BJ Kirschhofer as well. Hi, BJ.
Hey, it's nice to be with you here to help wrap up the season. I'm joining you from Bozeman, Montana. Typically, I'd be with the guys, well, really all of us, Lisa as well, in Churchill, but home in Montana instead.
Yeah, so it was definitely a different season for Polar Bears International. Usually, a lot of our staff members are in Churchill on the ground, on Buggy One, roaming around looking for polar bears all season. This year, it was really Kyron and Dave holding down the fort, and they did a fantastic job. Them, along with our incredible viewers and moderators, cam ops, got some of the best footage we've seen, I think, in a polar bear season. We've been doing this with the polar bear cam for, I think, 10 years or more, BJ, and this was one of the best years I've seen. As we've been going through the clips this morning, I've just been like, this is from this year too, oh my gosh, so cool. So we're going to talk about some of our favorite clips in a moment, and if you have a favorite clip or a favorite photo, we would love it if you could pop it in the chat box on the explore.org website. We want to know what your favorite moment of the season was. We've been going for over a month at this point. The ice is coming back and the Bears are on their way out, so we're wrapping up, but wow, what a year. So let us know what you liked and if you had any favorite clips or highlights or gifts that you pulled or made. We'd love to give you a shout out and see what your favorite moment is. Before we get right into that, we just wanted to give you a quick update on what is going on with the cams right now. What can you expect? So I was hoping that you guys, Kyron and Dave and BJ, are so involved in maintaining the cams and keeping them running. And it is really difficult. And I don't understand half of what they talk about, but I know it's not easy to keep those cams running in the Arctic as it starts getting freezing cold up there. And can you guys talk a little bit about, are the cams going to keep going this winter and how?
Sure,
Well,
I'll kick us off here. Most of the cams are now packed up. The guys did a real nice job of securing the cameras for the long winter season. Buggy One cam, unfortunately, has been put to bed, as well as the Lodge North and South. But we do still have a couple cams that get to continue through the year. And of course, we're watching it right now. This is Cape East and West. These cameras are powered by solar and wind and run off of batteries in an old research tower out in Wapuss National Park. So these things, weather permitting, really, it's kind of when enough energy can be generated for them to work. They will be operating all throughout the winter season and into the spring of next summer. And then, of course, we have the Northern Lights camera, and we are just entering into prime Northern Lights season right now.
Very exciting. And Kyron, usually, BJ's there on the ground to help with this stuff. And you, over the last few years, have become such an integral part of keeping these cams running. And this year, I mean, it was really you and Dave on the ground with BJ on the phone. But what was it like keeping the cams running? I know the viewers don't see the behind the scenes all the time and how difficult it is to keep these things going all day. What was the season like for you with all that troubleshooting?
Well, there's always an enormous amount of planning that goes into these seasons, and all the staff, like, they put in a lot of work and time and effort in order to ensure that the season runs smoothly. But just like anything else, sometimes we run into some technical difficulties, and they're kind of to be expected. We just try to be as prepared as possible. So I'd say, all in all, this season went by really well, and with the help of Dave, and then of course BJ, if things did go wrong, we'd get him on the phone right away, and we were able to troubleshoot. So we never really did have any major catastrophes, which is
not really,
really good.
What was the is that how I think a lot of this technology was designed in a warm environment, a warm lab, and we've got these tiny, tiny little wires and tiny little plugins to work with, and of course, it's several degrees below freezing, and so you can work with your gloves after about a minute, then you've got to run inside and warm up and go back out for another minute. So it's certainly a tedious task to do the most menial little job, but we get it done.
I'm sure people too, if you watch the cam as Buggy One's actually on the move, you'll know that it's a bumpy road out there too. Yeah. So things always seem to be kind of rattling loose or shaking free. So yeah, we have come to expect it. We've always got our tool bag on hand.
That's for sure. And what are you guys going to be working on as the polar bear season wraps up and Buggy One gets docked? Are you staying in Churchill, and what does your day look like now in the coming weeks?
Yeah, so we're going to be sticking around. Like I said, there's lots of planning that goes into the season. So there's also a lot of pack up and maintenance and inventory and things like that happens when the season's over. And that's to help ensure that we can start smoothly next year. So before we put Buggy One away, we make a list and try to address any maintenance issues or anything like that we need to. Hopefully we'll be able to catch our breath here in a little bit after that is complete, and then we'll be looking to start Aurora season, which is always very exciting.
Yeah, so Aurora season's essentially February and March, so it's not long. You know, it's 8 weeks before we get into February. It's 8 or 9 weeks away. So.
Oh, it's coming fast. Yeah, and we're so excited to have PBI House and have you guys there to maintain PBI House and keep it going through the winter. We had expected to have more tourists in it this year and next year than there will be, but no matter what happens, we'll still have it open safely under restrictions to the public as needed. So people will be able to still visit and view what we have there, have the Northern Lights Camp streaming in there, and hopefully the community can use it as needed as well for meetings, or the school can use it too. So it's definitely supposed to be a community space, and thank you guys for taking such good care of it. I know we got some visitors there this year, and hopefully in the future we'll have a lot more again. BJ, I have a quick question for you. So someone is asking about the Lego Buggy One that's been created, and I bet some viewers don't know about it. Would you be able to speak for a moment about the Lego Buggy One, and is it in Churchill right now? When can people see it?
You know, I don't know when the official release is of the Lego Buggy One, but we've got a couple staff members, and especially one of our staff members' child, Ella, but maybe you've seen her on, you know, the entrance, the pre-roll video for our Tundra Connections series here. She's the young gal who says, she spins around in a chair. I can't remember exactly what she says there, but anyways, she and her father, I believe, built this Lego Buggy One. It is super cool. There's definitely some photos floating around on social media. Check them out. It's pretty accurate. You know, they even went to lengths to put the bathroom in. The steering wheel's in there. It has big tires. So a super cool build for sure. Worth checking out, and you know, pretty much to scale.
Pretty much, yeah. I can't wait to see it. So I believe it's being shipped to Bozeman, and then it will eventually make its way up to PBI House. So it's not quite there yet, but that is another thing in the future. Hopefully people can see if they're able to visit the house, and we can maybe show it on camera next year for sure. So yeah, we're very excited about it. It's super cool. We also are very excited about the bingo game that was played this year on the polar bear camps. And there were 17 winners, which just completely blows my mind that 17 of you were able to complete this bingo card, right? So amazing. Yeah. I mean, it was such a fun bingo card, but it wasn't even released until Polar Bear Week, which is the first week of November. So in less than 3 weeks, 17 people filled out the whole thing, and a lot more of you participated. So thank you so much. If you were a winner, I believe Explore has reached out to you already, but let us know. And if you're a winner, let us know in the chat boxes, or maybe share the snapshots. But we were completely blown away by participation in that. Thank you so much. It was so much fun. And with that, we do want to roll into some highlights, and maybe we can show some things that were on the bingo cards. So we have Katie Miller, very critical PBI staff member, also in Bozeman, Montana with BJ, and she's the one mixing this right now. And she's got all sorts of highlights that we pulled and that were sent to us from the cams this year. And we just wanted to kind of roll through some. This one I find fascinating here. So we've got a mom and cub. And, you know, polar bear moms are such good moms, and they have to teach their cubs how to be polar bears and how to act. And the way humans interact with their babies can be kind of different than the way wildlife does. And wildlife has, you know, sometimes things can look maybe a bit more aggressive, but that's the kind of communication that they have. So this is mom saying, nope, don't do that, please. Telling her cub, teaching a little lesson there. I think the cub tried to take mom's little bone that they were chewing on. So mom gives them a little check, and then they release and they're all happy, and the cub learned a lesson and they're loving again. So he learned a little lesson there, but what a great little behavioral snapshot there. And I know they're sharing a little bone there. And then what's this? Maybe Kyron or Dave, can you guys take over? That must be a buggy one shot.
It does look like buggy one. I don't think I was on the day or the buggy that day.
Yeah, I remember there was one snowy day. I can't remember that exact image, but certainly the nap time, I guess. I'm in a snowbank. We had a couple of days when we had some decent snowfalls, and a lot of the bears were just hunkered down in the snowbanks behind the willows.
Yeah, you gotta keep your eyes peeled on those days.
Yeah, we'd often park for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and they wouldn't move. And you turn your head for a second, and then that happens. So that could have been, I guess, either one of us. I certainly don't remember seeing that, but certainly that scene with bears hunkered down in the snowbanks for sure.
Yeah, and what's this guy doing here? Looks like he's
sunrise or sunset is pretty amazing here, huh?
Oh, beautiful light! Look at that stretch. Oh, that's a content bear. Ooh,
that's
looking
cool.
Around. I love. Yeah.
We did get to see.
I love it when they do that.
I was surprised this year. I hadn't seen the bears stand up too often. I've spent some time with black bears, and they do quite often stand up on their hind legs. And I think a lot of the times it's to maybe get a better look at something, or to try to, get upwind and kind of get a better sniff. But this year we've seen it numerous times with the polar bears, including the day that we had the mom and 3 cubs, and she was on high alert for any other bears that were in the area, and she stood up numerous times to above the willows to get a better look around.
That's so perfect. The polar bear inspects a buggy. Yeah, it's interesting to see them stand up like that. It's such a neat thing to watch. It gives them a real good view. They're so tall. A male polar bear is so tall in its hind legs that it can dunk a basketball just standing up. So it gives you an idea of how big they are out there and how far they could see if they do stand up. And it also makes sense for mom to get a really good view of what's around her and make sure her cubs are protected from anything incoming, to stand on the hind legs there. We saw that bear take a big yawn when it stood up and stretched as well. And it definitely could be tired, but polar bears do tend to yawn like that also to get a better sense of their surroundings. They have an organ at the top back of their mouth, the Jacobson's organ, and it's similar to what you see in cats as well. So it allows them to take in more air, and it's kind of like a smelling organ. So it gives them a good sense of what's going on in their environment, helps give them a good whiff. So that could have been part of that as well, the bear trying to get a good sense. Oh, and here's a nice one. This is a lazy bear. Did you guys see that out there?
Yeah, again, we did see a number of lazy bears, such as this one. They like to see, well, I think the one that I actually seen was backwards in the willows. This one looks like it's maybe in some fireweed, but they do like to kick back, relax, and stretch out, and you get to see their abdominal strength right there.
No kidding. That bear looks like he's at the top of the food chain. He's not too worried with the big exposed belly just hanging out. He's not too concerned about anything harassing him out there on the tundra. I love seeing that. What's next here? Oh, BJ, you've seen this a ton.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I think polar bears must be pretty itchy. Maybe they have allergies. I don't know. But they seem to really love getting into the willows there to scratch their backs. It's pretty awesome. Sometimes you'll even see them just walk straight over the willows to scratch their belly, and it looks like a bizarre way to get around the willows, but they just plow right over the thing, and all the branches scratch their tummy as it goes by. It's pretty hilarious.
We did see some of that. That on that day was wet. It had just gotten out of the water and was kind of rubbing through the snow and stuff, looking to maybe dry off, and then scratches back on the way by the willows.
Yeah, it's a built-in scratcher there. And then this day was incredible, and Kyron, I believe you were narrating a lot of this day with the triplets. What a special moment this season.
Yeah, we were not expecting to come across a mother with 3 cubs that day, that's for sure. And we did spot her in the willows from the coastal trail that day, and you could see the 2 cubs, so we knew it was a mom and 2. But then they actually got up out of the willows and started to travel, and that's when we spotted the 3rd. So it kind of came as a shock to me and Cassandra, who was joining me on the buggy that day. So we did find where they did kind of settle down, and we got to spend a couple hours with them, and that was our first encounter. And we sort of figured, we were extremely lucky to have seen them that one time, and we weren't sure if they're going to stick around, but lucky for us and everybody else who's in the tundra, they did spend a few days out there, and we had numerous encounters. It was really amazing to see, and you can see too just how healthy they all are. That was also made me very happy to see that as well.
Oh, definitely. Now, in person, was it pretty obvious that one of the cubs was like more of a runt or smaller, or did they all look pretty good? I know sometimes what we see with our eyes can be slightly different than what it looks like on camera, but on camera, they all look pretty healthy, as you said.
Yeah, that little guy there, it was very apparent that there was a runt out of the 3. I'd say it was even close to like half the size, but you can see it's still, for being a smaller bear, it still looks to be healthy. And I've been told too that there's a possibility it was maybe 2 males and a female cub, which tend to be typically smaller. So that would be the case there.
I think you started early in the broadcast here, Elisa, saying that this was a pretty remarkable year. Being able to see Wolverine, being able to see mom and 3 cubs. I mean, this is just one of those events that just doesn't happen very often, to be able to see this. So you guys really did, and all of you cam viewers as well, to be able to participate in it. Oh, here's that Wolverine. I mean, to be able to see both of these things in the same year and at multiple days, it's unreal. It really, really was a fantastic year. So here's the Wolverine itself, Gulo hanging out, cruising along. And I guess I didn't watch this one this day, guys. Were you on the buggy when it went bombing by?
Yeah, I was on the buggy, and it's difficult to get. First of all, you don't see Wolverines very often. I think it's the first time I've seen a Wolverine from the buggy. I've seen them from the Tundra Buggy Lodge a couple of times and seen them around the area, but first time in seasons that I've seen one from a buggy. So it just gives you an idea that they're not seen very often. And I've only ever seen them do one thing, and that's sprint. That seems to be what a lot of. They just move at high speed and cover massive distances. And this one was doing exactly that. And I think it was because you were on together, and the radio call we got was it was from one of the drivers, Buggy Bob, and I think he said something along the lines of, "Are you guys got him?" And we'd just been talking a few minutes ago about a little bear that was wandering around in the area, and we'd nicknamed him the Blackface. He had these 2 black patches on the top of his head. So that's what we're talking about to Bob. And then Bob's like, "Hey, you guys got him?" And it was like, there's this pause, and I think Kyron went, "Little Blackface?" And Bob was, yeah, that's him. But we weren't expecting Wolverine. So we were like, "Oh yeah, we'll come along there in a few minutes." And then right away, we realized he was talking about the Wolverine. So it was a surprise to everybody. And yeah, we certainly weren't expecting to see the Wolverine.
And here's some more of the wildlife that we got to see as well. Lots of red fox this year.
Yeah, every day.
And they're quite inquisitive. So this one gave me the opportunity to take a photo, and you can see on the cam here a sleeping one, and super fluffy and really vibrant red fox right there.
Beautiful. And we do, maybe we'll, oh yeah, go ahead. It was so neat to see them come in. You guys had that one extra spectacular day where there was a seal kill out there, and there were so many bears and foxes and birds, and we have a few photos from that. Maybe you could talk to us about that day. That was nuts.
It was amazing. We didn't know, like you could see here, this is the bears playing a little game of tug of war, and that's actually the seal that you're seeing them tugging on. So they're a bunch of happy bears there that day. I think we kind of lost count, but we were probably over 20 bears that were kind of around Buggy One. It was really amazing. And that previous photo with the fox too, then it didn't take long. The fox, they're opportunistic, and they could sniff out that seal, and it was making little darts in there to grab itself a piece of food. And those bears, it was fun to watch. They're very protective over their food. So you can see here that one jumped up on the bank and actually scared the fox back away. So just watching their behavior and even the bears, like I mean, getting this shot here with this many in one frame is quite amazing. And I don't think you often see family groups like this around other males. But when there's a food around, they all seem to be quite happy being so close together.
Yeah, so usually polar bears need to head out on that sea ice to go hunt seals, but occasionally one unlucky one does get stranded, and well, there you go. That's what happens. And we saw a lot of sparring this year, a lot of sparring. That was also pretty great. I know, Dave, maybe out of all of us, you've been the one who's been to Churchill most in the fall or has been, doing the bear season thing the longest. Have you seen many years that are as good as this one? I know, I've been working in Churchill now for 10 years, and from what I saw in the cams, I mean, this season rivaled all others. It seemed pretty special.
Yeah, I know. I think definitely it was a very good season for a while. I don't know if that was a combination of us having, pretty much free reign of the tundra. If there was cool things going on in the past, we might have been waiting on another buggy and then it might have been over. This time we could just pretty much every day we just pick and choose where we want to be within the trail system, of course. And yeah, I think that was part of it. But also we don't get to see wolverines very often. That's any of the buggy drivers. They don't see that very often. Nobody gets to see triplets very often. And the seal kills are quite rare as well. So a combination of having a few rare events interspersed with us being the only ones out there for the most part, and getting to spend quality time in quality areas.
And this is a lodge shot from the Cape right now. I mean, bear season isn't over yet. These bears, you got two sparring there on the right, and then two more. It looks like pretty decent sized animals still cruising. So, definitely keep tuning into the Cape cams here as we get closer to December, because there's still bears going. There's still bears moving around out there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, BJ. So if we look at the sea ice maps and at what the sea ice is doing, it's really driving home right now why polar bears are near Churchill, Manitoba. The way Hudson Bay is right now, the ice is forming first near Churchill, and there's a nice little chunk of ice there, and I think that's why we're seeing all these bears kind of move through the area, and many have left to go on this chunk of sea ice. But if we look at the whole Arctic as a whole, we're still trending below even the lowest year in terms of ice cover that we would expect right now. And still much of Hudson Bay is uncovered. But again, the reason that we find polar bears near Churchill, Manitoba, and why it's called the polar bear capital of the world is because we do find sea ice here as one of the first places in the whole Arctic, and the bears know this. So they're super happy to be out seeing that ice and snow early this year, or right on time, we should say, which is really, really nice. But they are going to be kind of concentrated on the little patch of ice, and we hope that ice keeps growing so they can get out farther on the bay. But you'll see, yeah, they're not all gone. Polar bears aren't robots. They don't do exactly the same thing every day. We have still bears hanging out and having fun and sparring on the Cape cams, which has been super cool to watch. Oh, this is a great clip too. We were laughing at this guy. This is a little pancake bear. Did you guys see this one happen? I know bears do this sometimes when the ice is a little bit thin and they're testing it.
The bear that we had seen earlier scratching the willows that I said came out of the water, there's actually 3 on the ice that day, and it wasn't, this is pretty awesome, seeing this bear behave like this. But we did get to see how the bears do test the ice and how they navigate, and find maybe some stronger ice and avoid the weaker stuff. But they will kind of splay out in order to distribute their weight so that they can make it across some of the thinner stuff. So we did get quite a bit of that this year, and it was really fun to watch, because every once in a while they do break through and the bears do end up getting wet, but they're really good at navigating ice.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and this is a good one. What's happening here, BJ?
I think this bear is just really enjoying the fresh snow next to the buggy track there. And again, I think this goes back to whoever's comment earlier. This is the apex predator here. Not a lot of cares, not worried about a whole lot. Just relaxing, enjoying the cool weather. Probably it was a hot summer, now it's getting into the season it loves the best. And just getting to hang out in the snow.
Ugh. And those feet, oh my gosh, those huge, huge feet. Of course, good to distribute weight over the sea ice, kind of grippy like winter tires so they don't slip, and so furry. Kind of they have like built-in wool socks with their fur on their feet there so their feet don't get too cold on the ice. It's just so nice to see polar bears in the snow. You know, we see them in Churchill throughout the summer because there's no sea ice on Hudson Bay. They come ashore and hang out, and the cams, oh, I think always generally start before there's snow on the ground. So we start by seeing the bears in the willows and kind of in the dirt and the mud and whatever. And that is wonderful too. You know, they can still have a nice chill time there. But when that snow starts to fall and we see the bears get to be in a habitat that's more similar to their preferred habitat, the sea ice, when they have that snow, when they can itch themselves on the ice and go for these little snow baths, it is just so nice to see. I think you can really tell that the bears are, you know, all about the ice and snow. They very much are an Arctic animal. Very, very cool to see. So we want to show you maybe one more picture. Now this one's a little bit graphic. So I'm going to give you a warning. If you don't want to see something graphic, don't look, just close your eyes for a minute. We'll just keep talking about it. But Dave took an incredible photo that kind of drives home this food web. You know, yes, polar bears are at the top of it. We talked about foxes today. We showed a bunch of red foxes. There are Arctic foxes out with the polar bears. And the Arctic foxes generally like to follow the bears around on the ice, but they are smaller than the red fox, and the red fox can outcompete them. So Dave, what are we looking at here?
So I guess I should back up a little bit. The backstory to this, there was a red fox chased and killed an Arctic fox just 50 meters from the buggy. And that was, again, a surprise. It's just a flash of red followed by a flash of white. And you look and it's all over. It was really quick. So the red fox killed the Arctic fox and then cached it. So it buried it in a little snowbank and walked away. And then 5 minutes later, this bear came along, dug it up, and just played with it. It didn't eat it. It just flopped it around a bit, then dropped it. Then another bear came along and did the same thing. And then the red fox came back and decided to dismantle the Arctic fox and run off with little bits and pieces and stash it somewhere else. So it is interesting to see. Nature's not always rainbows and cherries and things like that. You know, there's lots of other things happening in nature. And it was very interesting. And that's been, again, it's not an event that we see very often, but it's been documented more and more the last few years as the Arctic foxes in this area seem to be more numerous than the Arctic foxes. So, I mean, it's anecdotal from my side, you know, but, 15 years ago when I first came to Churchill, you'd go on the tundra and you'd see just Arctic foxes. And now you're seeing primarily red foxes. So there has been a change in that over the last few years. I'm seeing more and more red foxes. And I think pretty much every day was red foxes this year.
Yeah,
pretty much every day.
The color phases too of the red fox, which is very cool to see.
Right, there's some really, really neat fox research that goes on in Wapusk and in the Churchill area because of, the foxes and the incredible dynamic between the red fox and the Arctic fox. And I believe that the current knowledge is that, you know, the red fox outcompetes the Arctic fox. They're bigger, they're nastier, they kill the Arctic. And as the red fox moves up into the Arctic fox's habitat because of changing climates and warmer climates for the red fox, the Arctic foxes are going to get kind of slammed. So I think there's a lot of, you know, fox experts, I'm not one, who are monitoring this. And it's a really, interesting phenomenon and very interesting to see a little tiny slice of that play out on the polar bear cam. Very crazy. So we have some questions coming in, which is fantastic. Okay, so this is about polar bears. I believe, what behavioral changes are you seeing throughout the year with less ice, changes in diet, migration patterns type of stuff? This is a really good question because so much of what we talk about with polar bears and changes that they go through with sea ice really is timeline dependent. So when we talk about changes in sea ice and polar bears, you know, struggling with that and their populations declining, we're talking a little more long-term generally. So these polar bears in the Western Hudson Bay population, we used to have about 1,200 of them in the 1980s. Now we have about 800 of them, maybe a little bit more than that. But this definitely comes down to, sea ice changes. They're not on the ice as much, they're not eating as much. When you don't get as many calories, it's harder to have babies and be healthier out on that really harsh Arctic sea ice. But when we look more short term, so we might not necessarily see major changes year to year. But one thing we could say possibly is that in years where there's worse sea ice or the ice melts earlier and breaks up later, we do expect that there will be more human bear interactions. So in poor ice years, we tend to see more polar bears kind of coming in or near the town or being handled by the polar bear alert team in Churchill. We see them basically trying harder for food. They didn't get enough food on the sea ice, so they're going to come on land and try a little bit harder to find food there. And this is one thing I think about this year that made this year so special, is that this was a good ice year, and we've actually had a couple good ice years in Churchill. So the breakup was on time. So the bears weren't having to get off early. They could, eat as long as they're used to eating. And then the freeze up was on time as well. So they could get out, maybe get a little bit of food on time. So they weren't having to push themselves extra like we've seen in other years. And that translated into triplets. It translated into generally healthy bears, and it translated into very few bears relatively being handled by the polar bear alert team, which is very, very cool. So it kind of just drives home the point that, these bears, they need sea ice, and they need, generally stable sea ice that melts and freezes at roughly the same time every year. And when they have that, things, nature's kind of in balance, which is cool. But we do know that over time, especially if we don't get our act together with climate change, we will continue to see sea ice declining in this region, breaking up earlier, freezing later, and that's going to lead to more issues with these polar bears. So I don't know if you guys can speak to anything like you've seen on the Tundra, or anything that might relate to that in terms of, you've been there we've all been working in Churchill for quite a few years now. If you notice things certain years, especially Dave, you've been there for quite a while. As we said, what do we see with these polar bears in terms of what's going on with their habitat?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, it's such a tough question. It's a really tough question. There's no doubt that the ice is changing. I mean, that's, with a few sort of crazy sort of websites you may look at, but, it's pretty much undisputed. It's undisputed that the ice is changing, the weather is changing, the climate's changing, everything that is changing. As far as like my personal observations, I just simply don't know how to interpret what I'm seeing in that thing. I know there's this year was just kind of a standalone year. What we saw this year, I think, is I don't know if I want to say that the bears were bored and they came up to us because we were the only machine on the Tundra. I don't know. I think this year, and it's just kind of, I'm still kind of processing what we actually saw this year. It was just such a standalone entity in its own. I don't know if we can learn anything about sort of bear behavior, bear experience from this year. I really don't know.
I think like what you had said too, Lisa, that a few good years on the ice, then that translates to like these larger family groups or more family groups. So we have had a few good years here in Churchill where the bears have spent ample amounts of time on the ice and were well fed. And then now we're starting to see those cubs and those family groups. That was for sure one of my observations for this year is we did see quite a few more juvenile bears as well as family groups, at least more than I'm used to. So
and not as many large males until late in the season. So it was probably really late October, even early November, before we started seeing a notable increase in the big males. So like everyone's been saying, the amount of family groups and females with two cubs, it's actually to see a female with a single cub was actually quite rare. It was females with two or three, as the case may be. But it was kind of seeing females with cubs wasn't an unusual event this year. It was an everyday.
Yeah. I really appreciate those comments. Yeah, I think again, a couple good ice years, it seems like the bears have been eating well, and you see that translated. Triplets used to be a lot more common in the Western Hudson Bay population. They were kind of known for having triplets, and even this population used to wean their cubs earlier than others because food was so abundant on the sea ice. It was one of the most productive polar bear populations in the world. And so because it's one of the most southern populations, and we've been able to document the climate changes happening and sea ice declines happening over decades now, and we really do need decades of data. And I appreciate Dave's comments, like 1 year, it's so hard to say anything or process 1 year in context because it's just 1 year. To say anything about polar bears, we need to look at decades. They're a long-lived species. They reproduce slowly. Changes happen slowly. We need to look at a lot of data to make any form any opinions or draw any correlations or causations here. But with Western Hudson Bay, we've been able to look at data since the 80s. And we do know as the sea ice declined, we went from this super, super productive triplet producing, weaning early population down to something a little more, average in terms of the other polar bear populations. More single cubs. We have smaller bears here now. But again, a few good years can really make a short-term difference for these mother polar bears, especially if they're able to get really, really fat while they were pregnant and then have a couple good years on the ice and raise those cubs up. That's awesome. We do know that, when we talk about climate change and we talk about sea ice declining, this isn't a linear thing. We can expect more good years in the future, and that's wonderful. But we do also expect we will see more and more bad years. So we do know that just because this year was good doesn't mean next year will be. So we're just really glad that the freeze up happened on time this year and the bears can get out and eat. But we shouldn't, totally celebrate that polar bears are, oh, they're good to go now, no conservation concerns. We do know that we still have to work to protect the species, and that's Polar Bears International's mission to conserve the species on the ice they depend on. Hudson Bay is predicted to potentially be ice-free by 2050 to 2080, so somewhere in there. So, within my lifetime for sure. And no ice translates to no polar bears in Hudson Bay. We know we'll more than likely still have polar bears in the high Canadian Arctic for sure, but we want to keep polar bears in Hudson Bay and healthy across the Arctic. And so that's why Polar Bears International does so much work to help inspire people about these bears and how incredible they are and like how awesome it's been watching them, and hey, let's keep them here and here's what we can do. So we're really encouraging people to use your voice, vote for polar bears, stand up against climate change, push our leaders to get more greener energy solutions. We need to use less fossil fuels, use more renewable energy, make what we do use more efficient, and then just let our leaders know that polar bears deserve a healthy future, but we do too. And that's the really cool thing about polar bears. Again, they're this apex predator, they're this umbrella species. Everything we do that's good for them is good for the foxes we just saw, is good for all these Arctic animals, but is also good for ourselves. And so we do invite you to join us throughout the year, even though the polar bear cams are starting to wrap up. There's, Polar Bears International is still working all year round. We have research projects coming up in the spring, hopefully. Well, even if we're not there in person, they should be happening. But we keep an eye on polar bears all year long. We do have our Polar Bears International Bear Tracker on our website. If you'd like to check out our bear tracker, you can see where live polar bears are right now. And we have outreach all the time, and more than ever now that people are at home more, we're trying to offer more and more programs for students and teachers and anyone who might be interested. So please do check it out. We're also always reachable. You can email questions@pbears.org anytime to ask any questions. We can also do one-off connections with classrooms if you'd like. We're using Flipgrid now through Microsoft, so please do check out Flipgrid for more resources and to get in touch. And then February 27th is International Polar Bear Day. So you will see a lot of us, no doubt, leading up to International Polar Bear Day in late February. We always have a ton of fun. And that's also the height of Northern Lights season, which is super cool. So we can kind of highlight both things going on right there. The Northern Lights season is so special. And it's really just lovely to imagine the bears hunting out on the dark ice with the Northern Lights over them. I mean, like classic Arctic imagery over here. It's going to be a really, really great winter. There's a beautiful clip of it there. And I was hoping you guys actually could maybe speak briefly about the Northern Lights cam. I know that you're doing some maintenance on it right now, and it's such a great cam. In fact, looking at the stats, it's some people's favorite cam, I think. BJ, could you talk a bit about the history of this cam, where it is and what's going on with it?
Yeah, we've kind of bounced around locations a little bit, but we have had the Northern Lights cam at the Churchill Northern Studies Center for at least the last 5 years, if I can remember. And it doesn't just catch Northern Lights. We've had the gyrfalcon on it a few times, some other great wildlife during the day. But of course, nighttime is when it's dark and when the spectacular Northern Lights happen, like you're seeing here. The camera has had some issues over the last 2 weeks. Of course, it's just hard to make things operate in this cold weather, and especially a camera that sits out every single day of the year. The lodge cams and some of these other cameras, we get to put them away for a chunk of time and then kind of refurbish them as we pull them out. Northern Lights camera isn't so lucky. we stuck it out there, 4 years ago or something like that, and it's been operating pretty well ever since. So the guys are actually heading out this afternoon here, and we're going to work together to get it up and running again, and hopefully have a flawless season here coming up in the next few months.
Absolutely. Yeah, and hopefully we can help set up another live chat with an Aurora expert. Those are always great, and I always learn a lot. Yeah, I I love the Northern Lights, but I need to know more about how they happen. They're so cool. We have another question here from Chris, and I can answer this one because it's fresh in my mind. Are you seeing more polar bear hybrid offspring with the movement of the species? So this is a super fun question. We do get this one occasionally. We do know that polar bears and brown bears can mate, and we tend to call the offspring roller bears, which is kind of a fun name, but not very scientific. But there was a case in the high Canadian Arctic a few years ago now with a female polar bear that gave birth to hybrid cubs. So this is after much DNA analysis and after figuring out what was going on. So this one female polar bear did give birth to 2 cubs who were hybrids. They went off on their own. And then I believe she mated again, and they mated with brown bears. So they kind of gravitated toward the brown bears in their lives and mated again. So we ended up with bears that were 3/4 brown bear, 1/4 polar, and then these half and halves. And first of all, it's interesting that the hybrid was fertile and could breed. You don't always see that when 2 different species breed. But polar bears are most closely to brown bears in their ancestry. So I guess they can still breed and produce viable offspring, which is very interesting. Now, those bears that were produced weren't a great fit for their environment. So polar bears are so specialized to the Arctic and sea ice and hunting seals. And brown bears are more generalist, but still very much terrestrial bears who eat a lot more omnivorous diets. And so the resulting offspring apparently looked kind of weird. They acted kind of weird. Hunters who spoke about coming across these bears kind of felt like these bears were not, they kind of knew something was up with these bears right away. So as far as we know, there's no more of them in the wild right now. And it really was just this one isolated case of a female polar bear mating with a male brown bear. Whether we expect it to happen more often, maybe it could happen a little more often as, polar bears maybe have to change their patterns and maybe brown bears do a bit, but we don't think it will become super common. Generally, the species are pretty separated during the season where polar bears would be mating in the spring. Often the brown bears are still hibernating by then, and brown bears can be a little more aggressive. So we don't know if we'll see more of it. We might. But luckily we have DNA now. So if we do see it, we can do a biopsy dart potentially. So that's when you shoot just a little dart at a bear and it takes a little punch out, and the bear can run off and you collect a little punch of the skin and fur, and then you can run the DNA and get a lot of information that way. So that's always an option if we see a weird bear out on the landscape to find out more about these hybrids. But right now it's very isolated, very few. Might not happen again for a long time, but if it does, no doubt it will be a news story and we'll be talking about it. So that's always a fun question. And then there's a question, and I can reply with a link, but there are questions about doing these classroom visits. So I can actually go in after we're wrapped up here and put some information on how to contact Polar Bears International and how we can set you up with a polar bear expert and give a chat to your classroom in the coming year and schedule something. And also when we do schedule our spring events and our Polar Bear Day events, we'll always share that with the explore.org community because we love you guys. You're amazing. You support so much of what we do. And I do want to give some shout outs to some people that were very prolific posters this year. So some that we saw a lot of posting were Maisie the Mule, G High, Anna Tinsley, and Elites. Am I saying that right? Or Liz T? I don't know how to say that properly, but we want to really thank you guys and the cam ops and the mods and Cloud, who's just such a champion for us. Thank you so much for all you do for us and for polar bears. And yeah, I guess we'll start to wrap up. Do you guys want to say anything as you it's just crazy that it's wrapping up for the season. I don't know, Dave and Kyron can give a shout out to all the people who were watching you for so long.
Well, I'm very happy that we were able to get the cams out this year and share those bears with everybody. I'm happy that it was such a fantastic season. It always goes by so fast. It seems like we were just gearing up and getting started the other day, and now here we are wrapping things up. So it comes and goes really quick. But luckily here in Churchill, there's never a dull moment. So we've got Aurora season coming up, and then not long after, we'll be looking at spring and belugas, and there's always something fun here to do. And then before you know it, we'll be back on the Tundra. So thanks to everybody that tuned in, and thanks to, like Elise had said, all the mods and the cam ops and all the viewers and explore.org. We really appreciate everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sure.
Thanks, guys. BJ?
Yeah, it takes a huge group of people to make this stuff work, and thanks to everybody at explore.org. It's always a pleasure to work with you, and everybody kind of in the wider social net there too, with the mods and everything. Like everybody has said, it's truly a pleasure to work with you guys, the camera drivers as well. The PBI team, we've got folks spread across North America that came together to help make these cams and all of our chats happen. Folks in Winnipeg, and of course the guys up north there. It's really is fun working on this with you and trying to figure out how to make all this stuff work in an age of a pandemic is interesting, and we got it done. And nice job, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It has been a very interesting year for us, for polar bears, for all of you. But we're here for you. We're here to, be your window into the polar bears world all throughout the winter. So thank you again for everything. We will be in touch, and please do stay in touch. And you can see by this morning, there's still polar bears out there. So we're going to, of course, stick around often until the polar bears are all gone. And then again, we're still here. Email questions@pbears.org anytime. You can also find that information on our website, and do check out the polar bear tracker. And so with that, we just want to end on a fun video on, how we can all help make sure polar bears stay out on the Arctic sea ice and stay hunting seals as long as possible. And thank you so much for everything you're doing. And please stay in touch, and we'll see you soon, hopefully in Northern Light season.
Future generations of people and polar bears depend on the decisions and plans that we make today. The key to getting the climate back to functioning the way it should, and to preserving a future for polar bears across the Arctic, is to move away from using fossil fuels for energy altogether. The most important thing we can do is vote with the climate in mind to let our leaders know we support a swift transition to renewable energy sources. In the meantime, we can directly participate in and learn more about our local and regional renewable energy options. We can all make a difference outside our own households by influencing where our energy comes from. We hope you leave here feeling inspired and return home to leverage your voice and your influence, because together we can make sure that polar bears roam the Arctic sea ice for generations to come.